All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going deep on an audio message from Robert Morpheus Thinks, Haastrup-Timmi, a tech entrepreneur.
Yeah, really interesting guy.
He's got some thoughts about, well, the Black community in tech and innovation, and maybe the lack of it, you know? And what makes it even more interesting is that Robert's not just talking, he's done it. He's built a successful crypto startup, even founded blackworld.com way back in the Web 1.0 days.
Exactly. He's got the experience. And it makes his perspective so intriguing, especially with how committed he is to diversity. Look at blockchaincompany.info, the platform he runs. Over 15,000 videos curated. That's dedication.
15,000. So here's what we're going to explore. Robert's having a tough time finding Black representation in the very content he's curating. It's like he's built these platforms to showcase diverse voices, and then he's running into this issue.
It's a paradox, kind of. Leads to some interesting observations about the Black community as a whole, for sure.
It does, and he's not holding back.
No, he's definitely not. It's like he's holding up a mirror, not just to himself, but to the entire diaspora.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he even says it straight out. What I'm criticizing here is ourselves, not pulling any punches.
What?
And he uses some stark comparisons to make this point.
Oh, yeah.
Like he talks about the All In podcast, right?
Yeah.
Big names. Naval Ravikant, Chamath Palihapitiya. But very few Black guests, it seems. Then he contrasts that with, you know, other groups. Jewish people, Europeans, Indians, Chinese. And how they collaborate, their level of success.
Interesting. He's not ignoring the struggles those groups have faced either, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about what Jewish people have gone through historically.
Right, absolutely.
But he's highlighting their resilience, that ability to work together, overcome obstacles.
Yeah.
And he seems to be suggesting there are lessons to be learned there, you know?
Definitely. And it gets even more personal when he brings up blackworld.com. He was surprised, actually, that non-Black people were more enthusiastic about it than people within the Black community.
Yeah.
Sees it as an early sign of a trend, something that's still happening today.
That raises a question, doesn't it?
Right.
Why might that be? Was it marketing? Or did the platform just not resonate with the audience he intended?
Good question. Worth exploring.
Yeah.
And this lack of internal support, as he sees it, could be a big reason why we don't see more Black voices leading in tech and innovation. It's not just about external barriers, but what's happening inside the community.
Makes sense. And he doesn't stop at the diaspora level either. He goes deeper, talks about concerns about Africa itself.
Wow.
Xenophobia in South Africa, even with how advanced it is.
Right.
And what he calls a tribal and fragmented nature in places like Nigeria. What do you think he means by that, by the way? What are some real-world examples?
Yeah, that's a great point. We need to dig into that more, understand his full perspective.
For sure.
He also mentions how hard it is for African Americans and continental Africans to collaborate, visa challenges being a huge hurdle. Sees it as a missed opportunity for both sides, especially with the potential of Web3 and AI.
Basically saying the clock is ticking. And if the Black community doesn't find its voice in these fast-moving fields, they risk being left behind.
Yeah.
To be clear for our listeners, Web3, that's all about decentralization, user ownership online, built on blockchain.
Right.
And AI, well, it's changing everything as we speak.
Yeah.
Robert's concerned that Black voices aren't being heard enough in how these technologies are developed, how they're used.
And he links that back to the lack of internal collaboration we were talking about before, right? He even uses the example of how hard it was to find Black voices for blockchaincompany.info, even when he was actively looking.
It makes you wonder if there's a fear of missing out. You know?
Yeah.
And that could just make existing inequalities worse.
Absolutely.
What do you think, listener? Are there other factors that lead to underrepresentation? And what happens if we get left behind in this tech revolution?
Big questions. It's not just about individual success. It's the collective future of the Black community in a world shaped by technology. And Robert says it all starts at home. That charity begins at home thing. He keeps coming back to it. Powerful stuff. It's about realizing the power we have in our own communities, building from within. We'll dive deeper into that in the next part, so stick with us. Yeah, that charity begins at home. It's the core of what Robert's saying, isn't it? Like, before we're asking for a seat at the table, we got to build our own table, too.
Building our own table, I like that. It's about self-reliance, right? Not waiting for someone to give us permission or recognition, but creating those opportunities ourselves.
Exactly. And it's not like he's ignoring the external barriers, the systemic stuff. He's just emphasizing that internal agency, like, we have a responsibility to empower ourselves, too.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying, look, systemic issues exist, for sure, but we can't just sit around and wait for them to be fixed.
We have to act. And that empowerment starts with supporting each other.
Mm.
I can't stop thinking about that blackworld.com story, how he felt like at times there was more excitement from outside the community than within. It is interesting, isn't it? Makes you wonder if there's a hesitancy within the Black community to really celebrate each other's wins.
Hmm.
Like maybe there's a fear of appearing like you're boasting, or a feeling that individual success somehow takes away from the collective struggle.
That's a really good point, and it ties into his comparisons with those other groups, like the Jewish community. He believes they have this strong sense of shared identity, collaboration, and that's fueled their success in so many areas.
Now, while those comparisons can be helpful, we got to be nuanced, right?
Yeah.
Each group's got its own history, its own context.
Of course, of course. It's not about copying another group's model exactly.
Right.
It's about identifying the principles, the core ideas, like investing in your own community financially, intellectually, and adapting those to the specific needs of the Black community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that investment, it can take so many forms. Supporting Black-owned businesses, mentoring young entrepreneurs, funding research by Black scholars.
Right, creating that cycle of support and empowerment that benefits everyone.
Exactly. And then that leads to his point about collaboration on those big, large-scale projects. He's asking, why don't we see more Black-led initiatives that could have a global impact?
Yeah.
It's a valid question. Makes us examine those internal barriers again. Are we hesitant to pool our resources or talents? Are we too focused on individual achievement at the expense of the collective good?
Definitely something to think about. And talking about collective progress, that message from Robert about Web3 and AI, how the Black community needs to engage with those technologies, that really hit me.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just being consumers in technology, it's about being creators, shaping it. Robert sees how transformative these technologies could be, but warns that if we're not active participants, we risk being left behind.
It's a wake-up call for sure. He's saying we can't just sit back and watch this tech revolution happen. We need to be right there in the thick of it, shaping the future.
And that means investment, education, a willingness to embrace new ideas, new ways of doing things. It's about building a culture of innovation and collaboration within the Black community, where our young people are encouraged to explore STEM, where our entrepreneurs have the resources to thrive.
It's bigger than just technical skills too, right? It's about having a voice when those decisions are being made, about how these technologies are actually used, making sure they benefit everyone, not just a select few.
Absolutely. We've got to ask those tough questions about ethics, bias, and the potential for these technologies to worsen existing inequalities or even create new ones.
And that's where that charity begins at home idea becomes even more crucial. It's not just building technical skills, it's building a community that can handle these complex ethical and societal challenges.
Having those hard conversations, challenging each other's assumptions, working together to make sure these technologies are used responsibly for the good of all.
So, bringing it back to our listener, Robert's message is a challenge, a call to action. It's an invitation to do some soul-searching, to think about how we can contribute to a Black community that's more collaborative, more innovative, more empowered.
He's urging us not to just ask for a seat, but to build our own tables, create our own opportunities, and shape our own destinies. It's about realizing the collective power we have, the potential, and using it to create a future that's more equitable and just for everyone.
And even though he's focused on the Black diaspora, that message has a wider impact. Think about your own communities, your own networks.
What are the things holding back collaboration and innovation in those spaces? How can you help create an environment that's more inclusive, more supportive, one where everyone can thrive? Things to think about as we head into the last part of this deep dive.
Yeah, it's about stepping back, and asking those tough questions like, are we really building those spaces where everyone feels like they belong, like they can contribute? Or are we, even without meaning to, putting up the same barriers that Robert's talking about?
Yeah, it's easy to focus on what's happening outside, but Robert's making us look inward at our own actions, our own biases. Are we really living up to those ideals? The collaboration, the support.
It all comes back to that charity begins at home idea, right? It's a call to action, not just for the Black community, but for all of us. Like, change starts with the little things, the choices we make every day in our own circles.
Absolutely. Like, whose voices are we amplifying? Are we mentoring those who are just starting out? Are we celebrating each other's wins, even the small ones?
It's about creating that sense of abundance, right? Where we see each other's success as our success instead of getting caught up in competition and scarcity.
Yeah, and that's where I think Robert's message goes beyond just representation. It's about belonging, a shared purpose, building a community where everyone feels valued, where their unique skills and perspectives matter.
And that's what leads to real innovation, right? Breaking down those walls and tapping into all that collective wisdom and creativity.
Exactly. When everyone's at the table, when everyone feels like they can speak their mind, that's when the magic happens.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Robert's message, here's the takeaway. We all have a part to play in building a better future, a more equitable future. And it starts with those little acts of charity right here in our own communities, our own networks.
It's about pushing ourselves to be more inclusive, more supportive, building those spaces where everyone can thrive.
Because in the end, Robert's call to action isn't just for the Black community. It's for all of us. It's about recognizing that we're all connected and working together to build a world where everyone has the chance to reach their full potential. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.